aware are you of all the opportunities that may lay in wait for you? Chances are not very, because we tend to live more in the present and understand the past. Looking forward isn't something the human brain was really ever designed to do. It's still part of really modern evolution, and evolution is a slow process. So part of the goal today is to really take you on a journey, and my guest today is my old friend, Raad Ghantous. And Raad has really spent a lot of time in his career focused on wellness from a commercial design standpoint, but really at the same time asking, like, why are we doing this? What are we trying to help people become? And he's really focused more on the personal journey now. You'll get some insights into his own journey, some of the serious challenges that he's had to face, and really where he's trying to take those learnings forward that start to bring in some other people into the equation and start to make this a more universal approach. He's currently doing the 75 Hard program. If you don't know about that, he'll share where he is on that and how transformational that has already been for him. You'll find that quite interesting, I think. And we'll hear about Raad Life. Raad Life started a decade or so ago, and it's at a pivot point now. He's just about to launch it in a new direction, and it's really going to be more personal, really more information and education based, to really explore these opportunities and help people learn how to explore them. And it's not just about what you can do, but also the things that you surround yourself with, the environment that you live in, and really start to imagine some possibilities. It's a vulnerable discussion, one designed really to help you start to ask questions that you may not have thought to ask yourself as you define and shape your journey in your life. With that, please welcome my guest, Raad Ghantous, and let's get on with the show. Okay, he's got his coffee. That means he's good to go. Raad Ghantous, welcome to the program.
Cheers, my friend. Thanks, Scott. Yeah, it's great to have you. And yeah, coffee. I mean, you got to have coffee, right?
It's part of my ritual every day, and I'm actually doing a bit of an experiment on coffee. That I don't want to get us off on a tangent here right off the get-go.
Oh,
but
come on.
yeah.
What are you experimenting with coffee?
I'm playing around with filtered coffee. That's a really kind of special coffee maker relative to espresso. So I'm working two angles because I really love the espresso, but I'm also
So
looking at
I
the.
since we're talking about, rituals and particularities and stuff of that nature, what is your drink of choice when it comes to coffee?
My norm is just to do like a cappuccino, but it's even a pretty simple cappuccino. I don't get into too much foaming or anything. It's I like my coffee rich, full, dark. Anything else is just dirty water.
Well, why is it so hard for me to get a cappuccino when I basically ask for one and I have to say super dry, only foam, blah blah blah. Otherwise, I end up with a latte. I mean, this is one of those, like, this is a question that has plagued me for the last 10 years. Like, I just order a cappuccino in Europe, I get a cappuccino. I order a cappuccino at a French restaurant finally in San Clemente that I found, and I get a cappuccino. If I go to any other place where it basically has baristas or, like, expert baristas or whatever it is, I end up with a latte every time I ask for a cappuccino, even when I say dry, because they literally scoop this. You can see them do it. They scoop the foam and then they pour the milk. And I'm like,
And that's why I say cappuccino, because really what I'm saying is like a small latte. Because that's really what they're serving,
So
right?
you're part of what has educated the.
No, I'm part of just like I don't want to have to educate everybody every time I order something. So anyway,
Well, I appreciate you just going down that rabbit hole with me, because it's one of those my pet peeves. Like, I finally, thank God, found a place in San Clemente where I live, which actually is a French little bistro, and I'll give a shout out. It's called Moulin. And finally, I can ask for a cappuccino, and they will give me a cappuccino in a large little mug. And it's like, okay, I'm good. I usually basically don't get to finish my cup, usually in the morning, unless I take the time to have a morning ritual that sets me up for success for the day. that includes that, which means that I have to get, be still enough to give myself the room enough to basically do that, do a little stretching, do a little meditation. And so I need something like this Umber mug, which basically is powered from below, and it basically keeps it warm. And I can, to get fancy, you get on your phone, you can adjust the temperature for what you want it for. So yeah, those things, those rituals are sort of seem to get more important as we age or as we evolve.
Yeah, for sure. So what I would tell you is I do finish that coffee first thing in the morning because it's absolutely part of my ritual. And at times it's to others' frustration when I'm like, no, I'm not prepared to move out of this place yet because I haven't finished my ritual.
Yeah.
And I got a few other elements to it that I just have a pattern that I've come to rely on because I think you were alluding it to, really how are you setting yourself up for the rest of the day?
Yeah, and when you don't do it, it sort of you're kind of it disrupts. I find that it disrupts my day. But it's again in a world that is just rushing all the time. You almost have to have a sort of a revolutionary, rebellious attitude to basically say, no, I'm going to take the time to put this stuff in place, and it is as important as rushing all around.
I think I approach it as having had some racing background. I have a very clear line between this is relaxation or it's prep. But when the light goes green or the race is on, that's a very different mode. And so I think a lot of people get caught up in this. They just like the idea of racing all the time, but they're not really racing and they're not really relaxing. And they, it's easy to lose track of time during the day.
Oh, and you're using that, physically, but it's also metaphorically that, people are just constantly racing. And, realities of life, you got kids and stuff like that. That's part of it that has to happen, but it's almost even more critical to have that intentionality to do that prep. And, you said relaxation and prep, and you kind of threw them together. But from what I was hearing when you were saying that is there's actually a difference. Like relaxation, for me, that morning ritual is actually prep, not
Yeah.
relaxation, right? So even within that nuance, there's a difference even in those two. Um,
Yeah. So I would more accurately define it as prep, race,
prep
recovery.
yeah, prep for the day. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, that's so. Yeah, so we're I'm prepped.
And that happens multiple times, not just once during the day. So it's not like first in the morning and then go for 12 hours and then
Right,
and go to recover and relax. So
right.
you and I have, one of those things that's really cool is I've got relationships with people from a lot of different career backgrounds.
Hmm.
What's unique about you and I is really this intersection at health and housing, which I always say those are two areas where people think they know more than they really do once they start to dig into it. And once we get to kind of our age, the housing thing and the health thing both become more important, and most people come to realize it, and they certainly in people I talk to. So what I thought we could talk about today was really this intersection point of health and housing.
Sure.
You clearly have a lot of intentionality around it, but you also have a lot of professional experience with it too, and so that's I think important, and it also is a way to bring some personal flavor to the conversation because everybody has their own element of creativity that they bring to life and the things that they do life, and you are clearly a great example of that.
I appreciate that. That's very kind of you. I think that I mean, we've known each other long enough, and we've kind of basically kept track of each other long enough. I think you and I probably very early on recognized the not for ourselves necessarily, but recognized it maybe for people that are older than us and what have you, seeing how people are transitioning from one aspect of their life where they, one minute you're a parent, then you're a grandparent, and then you're basically kind of retired, not semi-retired, and it's when we say health, sometimes health is looked at as being simply medical, right?
Right.
And yet it's so much more than that. It's health, medic. I mean, even just internal in terms of internal personalities or internal individuality. Excuse me. It's medical. It's mental. It's emotional, and that healthiness that goes beyond the physical is almost more critical. And sometimes it doesn't really get the attention it needs because the world isn't really the world is more um, physical than mental or emotional or cerebral, if you want to call it. It's more uh, task oriented. It's more function based than this sort of deeper level. Not to start sounding like a hippy dippy kind of like guru situation, but it's just, that's important. And so when we say health, it's all of that. It's your nutrition, it's your habits, and also kind of coming to terms with the reality of your life, and all of that. If it's in alignment, if it's actually uh, something you've taken the time to work on, and we all, it's a work in progress. I mean, I think the more you learn, the more you know, the more you realize you want to do more for the primary advantage of what benefits yourself, and not it's not in a selfish way, but because if you are in your wholeness, then that actually also ripples and magnifies towards everything that you're doing, whether it's your professional life, whether it's your personal life, whether it's your, dealing with adversities, whether it's, and change is never is you have no control over change. You have no control over um, aspects of life. We try to convince ourselves that we do, but you really don't. And that uncertainty at some point, I think we come to a crossroads where, when we're younger, I think we accept uncertainty as being just part of the journey. Like uncertainty is almost like a curiosity. It's an exciting thing. There's that sort of variable of not knowing and wanting to explore. And then along the way, we get sort of very regimented, whether it's responsibility based, whether it's societal pressures, what have you, to what is um, conventional, what is acceptable, right? And we kind of lose that. And some of us are maybe a little bit more embracing of that uncertainty early on, but we don't really know why. We don't understand it. It's just reactive, right? Or responsive to life. And there's sort of an excitement and a curiosity that's sort of built into our makeup. Some people are a little bit more subdued in how they go about life. The point is, at some point, you come to this realization that regardless of the uncertainty of life, regardless of what things are going to happen, you have to get yourself in a place, ideally, where that doesn't disrupt your health, your wellness, right? Your center, your sort of core, right? And so health is so much more than just the physical, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and if your regiment of wellness, so to speak, I kind of I've been flippant about this for the last couple of years, but if your regiment of wellness is a nice cigar and a bit of scotch, then that's your regiment of wellness. If your regiment of wellness is doing some, mushrooms or, like, or like some sort of microdosing of some sort, that's your regiment of wellness. And that is meaningful for you. So therefore, it is what gets you into that space of health and wellness. So how do you basically then incorporate all of that into when I say a regiment, I mean like a repetitive, by choice decision to incorporate that into your life in a daily way. Like we're talking about this being in the morning thing, right? But then you also brought in the fact that that's not the only point in the day that you basically then give yourself. It's stepping away from your desk. It's maybe doing some stretching. Maybe it's a little meditation, a little vibration therapy. It could be just stepping out and walking the dog, and getting some fresh air. So all of that is that wellness. And when you think about it as being so universal in its appeal, and then how do you approach your life for doing that? How do you design your life for that?
Right. And I had one other thought I'll add to that, which just happened to be took a ride. A doctor friend gave me a lift this morning, and and we were talking. He didn't realize some of the work I'd done, and he said, I was asking if, but he said, you're an engineer. You didn't go to medical school. And I said, so I'm part of the medical association. I said, but the difference is, I work on proactive health. You work
Yeah.
on treatment, and so really, it wasn't to say who's really working on health or not. That wasn't the way we were going, but it's really around those are the things that doctors are trained in, but they aren't trained on proactive health. And it's really the wellness piece is all around the preventive health, proactive approach to life, which are all the
Right.
things you're talking right in when we talk about wellness. It's created a lot of confusion, I think, amongst people around whether they see messages from doctors that are often conflicting, and that's part of the reason why is they have no particular advantage in this arena, certainly not to the level that we would tend to think. Um,
Well,
so
the whole system is built on reactive
yeah,
treatment versus proactive, empowered, this self-driven decisions that are basically based on your individual preferences. You're at the mercy of the system, and everything from insurance to the way that the medical training is, and all that stuff is just very reactive. And I want to just I wanted it's just something just clicked in my mind, Scott. So your book,
oh,
which I
look at
think
that.
maybe my camera is mirrored, and I'm sorry if there's that, but the title is Wealth Span, and it's spelled WHEAL, so it's health span with a W at the beginning of it. So we're talking about what we're talking about is really your true value, right? Your true wealth of your life,
Right.
right? And so you wouldn't basically wait until you have diminished assets in your bank before you actually talk to people and or go to the banker and go, I need to figure out how to basically manage my portfolio. You actually try to do it in advance. You're proactive about how you do it. You don't basically just wait till the last minute when the stock is basically, completely crash after watching it for a week to basically unload a particular stock and maybe, invest or reallocate into something else. You proactively do that to basically manage your wealth. So, sorry, the wealth, W. So when you basically look at health in that same capacity, then you basically are being more of an active participant in deciding those things. And it's kind of funny because we've heard about like prime, what's it, medical directives. I almost said prime directives like it's Star Trek, right? You know, medical directives. Just I'm a product of my generation, man. I can't
Yeah.
tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right? So, and I'm talking the first Star Trek, not Next Generation or Discovery or whatever. But basically, you're the way the system works is, well, make sure you have your medical directive. And my medical directives is what I want done, whether I want to be resuscitated or not resuscitated.
Right. Right.
Well, I would hope that there's other things in advance of that I'm actually proactively deciding about my wealth and health span, other than just leaving it for that sort of like final decision. I'm taking proactive action and I'm
How
being
to spend your
reciprocated.
last dollar.
Right, exactly. So, and the system is not rigged that way. And you and I have no longer known each other long enough to realize that when maybe my focus was about my parents and what was happening, my parents getting older, and we're sort of like in the sandwich generation situation. But now here we are. I turned 60 in January, so I'm first generation Gen X, first years of Gen X, and there's 15 years behind me, right? And not only are we in a position where we're now 20, 30 years maybe, or a little longer, whatever our lifespan is, but we have that much. So technically almost a third of your life is ahead of you. And how are you going to basically rewire? I don't even want to use the word retire, because who the heck wants to really retire if you're doing something you enjoy? And if you're not doing something you enjoy and you got 30 years, my guess is you maybe should find something that you like, because to play golf for 30 years, just shoot me, right?
Yeah.
The right. So those aspects are now us, not necessarily, or me, not necessarily my parents. But at the same time, the world seems to have moved off the focus on baby boomers and has moved on to millennials. And there's this 15 years of people that are, I think by last numbers, like 68 million people. We're not as big as boomers and millennials, but we're a good chunk of people. And nobody's really focusing on what this life means. What does this wealth mean? What does this health mean? What is the empowered approach to designing your life?
Yeah, it's I would say there are individuals who are doing things, but collaboratively or commercially, there's really not much going on because it's still a relatively new thing, right? So if we think about just stepping way back to say, well, retirement is a relatively new thing, it's a relatively modern invention. We thought we had it figured out, and now as lifespans have extended another, half generation at least, it's creating more light at the end of the tunnel for people. And so, yeah, and that's new from what was even just a generation ago. Like I tell people, what your experience was with your parents and your grandparents, I can pretty much guarantee yours is going to be significantly different because of
Absolutely.
all the changes around you. Even if you're doing all the same things, there's so many things have changed around you that you need to be looking at it differently than what your parents are, particularly that's the closest experience.
Well,
Talk to me.
it's very difficult to have long-term care insurance. I mean, let's just talk about practicalities, right? It's very difficult to have to be a person that has long-term care insurance because a lot of companies got out of that because the money wasn't there. Like you couldn't make money doing
And
that.
if you can afford it, you probably can self-insure.
Exactly. But I will tell you from personal experience, caring for my father with full-time home care, being fortunate enough to have proactively designed the house where we have the ability to house and take care of my parents as they got older, right? It still was very expensive. And so you have sort of the haves and have nots in terms of like resources also out there in that 68 million people, right? Society is not ready for what's we used to talk about this when you and I first met about the silver tsunami and it's coming and it's going to crash on the shores. It's crashed, man. I mean, we may be trying to make it to the higher ground so that we're not getting like drowned by this thing, but it's already hit the coast for
Sure.
sure. And society is not ready for that. There's attempts that have been made about like maybe cities fast tracking ADUs to make them granny flats or whatever, which ironically now is acting as a potential for younger people that are coming back home, because the real estate market is so expensive. So it's funny how things kind of like organically occur. But a lot of this stuff is different. Like when it comes to me, for example, if I was to project down the road and even have the ability to go through what my parents went through, right? It's going to be at the very least more expensive. At the same time, there's going to be more of maybe you know maybe there's more of an AI or an automated component to this thing. Maybe there is and the reason I bring that up is that really what you want? Like this is the thing that's interesting for me is we're at a point where, to your point, like it's not going to be like what our parents went through. It's a completely different reality that we're facing, right? But at the same time, the system and everything in place is telling us this is the way to do something, X, Y, and Z. This is the steps, whatever, right? If you're fortunate enough to know where to look, but it may not be what you want. It may not
Right.
be the way you want to actually age or mature or whatever. And I think we're different than our parents. Like there's a reason why for the longest time everybody agreed that the age of retirement is 65 or it's moving to 67 or whatever it is, right? And I hate to be cynical, but part of that is because people didn't live much longer than that age. So,
Right.
so,
Right.
right? I mean, that there's your social security, all of that stuff. Well, that's completely changed. So everything has been basically turned on its head. And to your point, the collaborative effort to actually come up with not only triage solutions to the situation, but to actually come up with proactive, sustainable, empowering ways to go about this is behind even today.
Right. It's I think there's a general lack of information around what the opportunities are. When I say opportunities, which is really another way of putting it, what would you like your life to look like? Well, if you don't even know what the options are, it's pretty hard to come up with much of a plan. And that's the idea, right? Is you're trying to create some goal that's worth working toward. Like the idea of living longer, the obvious question is, well, why? Why do you want to live longer? Right. So that's the first thing is you should be able to answer that. And it should be something, something down the road, not that what I'm doing today. Like I'll use the most popular example is I want to spend time with my grandchildren. Great thing to do. There's no one you'll probably influence more in terms of lives than grandchildren. But at the same time, they're going to grow up, and then what? They're going to become the tired teenagers who resent anybody who's a year older than they are, unless they're an idol, Instagram
But
star.
that's just normal. Even if they don't resent, they get on with their own lives.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah,
So it's that. So what else would you want to do? And to realize that there are actually many things to do. And it's not to say that don't do what you're doing now, but what is it you're working toward, right? And that's what wellness is. How do you get inspired about wellness if you don't know what you're working toward? How do you invest in something if you don't have an idea of what you want to get at the end? So so you mentioned about the book. It's all an investment mindset, right? I'm investing in tomorrow
right,
around I need options and I know that I need my health and my wealth to be
right.
able to execute and capitalize on the opportunities that are waiting for me.
Well, the options also need to be, take this from my creative expression, which is sort of part of my makeup, right? Those options need to be both innovative and reflective of the here and the now.
Right.
They also have to be personalizable, right? And I doing hospitality work and all this stuff, everybody, it's almost like it's a catchphrase: one-on-one customer service. Well, it cannot be one-on-one customer service when you're taking that script and applying it to 300 people that just walked through your door today. Like, that's not one-on-one customer service. It could be a starting point of connection, but then there has to be a flexibility component that's built into it that actually accounts for that. And if you take that same attitude and mindset and you say, okay, that's lacking in certain places, right? Because having a script, having the way to answer is fine, but it's not the end all. It's like saying ADA compliancy is the end all requirement. I've always told people ADA compliancy is your starting point.
Right.
What you should be looking at is universal design, because in universal design, you are able to actually accommodate a lot. I mean, just from a business perspective, you're able to accommodate a larger consumer base, regardless of abilities. So if you design your space to accommodate more people, that means more people will come to you. And if you're able to accommodate people with certain limitations, that even makes you more appealing and more of a destination for people, whether they're themselves limited or they have a family member that may be limited. Try to basically take your elder parent to lunch somewhere that you really want to go, but it happens to be on a not allowing for a counter space, for example, to do that. And instead of just basically segregating people into the able and the disabled, for example, or mobility challenged, if you just approach it from a universal design, you are now elevating your whole approach and what your offering is towards even more appealing to people, right? So I think they need to be innovative, but it also needs to be personalizable. You have 5 generations of people working in the workforce these days, right? And with the economic conditions the way they are, and the fact that people didn't save enough, they're basically staying in the workforce longer. So that's causing all kinds of issues as far as moving up when you have other people, or losing things because of ageism. But you have to be able to accommodate, or at least appeal to what drives these people, that is not a one size fits all. So you have to have personalization, you have to have innovation, you have to understand that the old wrapper, or sorry, the old product with a new wrapper is not really going to work.
Yeah, you create a new tagline, and that's all you do, right? You
I mean,
see a lot
I'm
of
not
companies
picking
do.
on like ARP or anything like that, but you have to be. I mean, and we had an entity here that does amazing work, and they run a lot of senior centers, but I don't want to go to a senior center. Let's rethink that. Let's call it a wellness center. I mean, I even see some places that are trying to be innovative and stuff like that, and they change the name and they change their label and they do all of that stuff, but then the programming that's happening inside is not really innovative to appeal to a larger audience and make those spaces uh, intergenerational almost, right? I don't want to go live in a community where basically everybody around me is the same age. Personally, I want to, and I don't want crying children next door either, but I would like to have that diversity. So to basically continue to do products for as far as housing goes, where it's individual, like 55 plus. Well, okay, fine, but 55 plus, what does that mean? There's this sort of the Jimmy Buffett version, right, with Margaritaville, and there's the Webb version, and then there's like just these 55 plus communities that are um, layered, but it's there's not really an overlay of programming, and maybe I don't want to be in an environment of a community like that with 400 houses. Maybe I want a smaller offering. Maybe I want something a little. I don't want to play on the information superhighway. I want to play in a nicely tree-lined street, so to speak, right? Metaphorically, those products don't exist.
Right, right. It's a well, we know. So maybe just back up a little bit and talk a little bit about where you're coming at it from professionally, because I haven't given you a chance to kind of talk about. So you're not just offering opinions here. This is an area where you have been really innovative in
Yeah.
your career.
Yeah, no, it's thank you, because it to somebody who's listening is like, this is all pontification, right?
Right,
There's nothing there's nothing like firsthand experience. Absolutely nothing like firsthand experience to basically have a sort of an authentic reference point. And a little bit of background. So I started down a path of doing an economics undergraduate, and then I went to do a master's in marketing. And I was 20 when I went to do a master's in marketing, and I ended up, my father was a civil engineer. So I grew up on job sites. And I loved it. I loved the fact that I was on job sites because there was a tangible measure of time spent. Like you could literally walk up and touch a wall and say, 2 months ago, that wall wasn't there.
right,
Effort went into building a foundation, building an infrastructure, and then cladding it with something that's aesthetic, right? And it's used as metaphors any way you like them, but there was something tangible more than just a report. Now, I'm not taking away from somebody who just does a report or a business plan, whatever, but there was an appeal. There was an actual physical element that basically gave me feedback to time spent, a measure of time value. I then ended up not going down sort of the business path so much. And then I started working for a friend of my dad who basically put me back on job sites. And it was again that feeling of satisfaction doing that. And in '91, went and did an undergrad in interior design. Again, just chasing a path of, well, why not? Let's see where this goes. Kind of like the uncharted path, if you will, right? And where it's like the road less traveled, which seems it's used so often as a bit of a cliche, but there's a lot of truth to that. The road less traveled connects back to what we were talking about, the uncertainty, the curiosity, the
right.
adventure, the journey, not just the destination. Um, the so I ended up doing interior design, and when I did interior design, I was captivated by this sort of hospitality space, this sort of hybrid mix of not pure commercial, not pure residential, quality of life through, whether it was a 3 star or 5 star, that there was sort of the quality of life promise, a little bit of the escapism of it, and sort of the layering of value add in a person's life, whether it's you're staying there for a couple of days, at a hotel property, or you're basically infusing that kind of element into your lifestyle, right? And then, of course, being in that space, we started interacting in about 2000. We started to see a little bit more streamlining of things like spas and wellness. Now, at the time in 2000, when that was happening, not that there weren't things like that before, because it was, rampant in the 50s and in the 60s as being something that was offering, especially at the high end properties. But it became more and more something that properties could not call themselves a full on resort without having that amenity.
For sure.
But even back then, those services were not really understood for what they were. They were almost giveaway treatments to appeal to groups. And I'm not trying to be gender biased, but they were like they would give them to women. Like same they would give genderly they would think that I'm going to give green fees to men, right? And so that it was kind of a loss leader, even on these properties. And as such, the management of the whole product was also inferior. Like the people that were running it were just somebody that maybe was a massage therapist. Now they basically are in that role, but there was no maximization of experience. There was not really maximization of value and benefits. It was just, massage, maybe a facial. There wasn't a depth of services. And so I've been in that space probably since I would say 90, solidly since probably about 98, right? And I've seen that change quite a bit. And it's always resonated with me that if I'm going to go spend money to go to something to experience this, and you see this happening with people that want to remodel their bathrooms and their master bedrooms, and even like some of their outdoor spaces primarily, they go and they spend time in these properties, and they come back and they try to want to emulate that experience, so bring that experience back with them, right, in their
Right.
own
Right.
homes. And so similarly, there's this other element of wellness that as we get more and more maybe seasoned, we realize we want in our home so we can maintain the experience and the benefit that we had by being there, but on our own terms on a regular basis. And you started to see some of that take place when we were segregated because of COVID. We were kind of isolated. And so some people that were a little bit more advanced in how this has been implemented in their lives started to buy things like infrared saunas and put them in their garages, right? The weight rack that was in the garage next to the car and the motorcycle became a little bit more of an offering of a gym in that space. Now you maybe had like
Mm-hmm.
pull-up bars, and you had multi-weighted dumbbells and some other stuff, right? And you made space for that in your life, in your environment, on your own terms, so you could basically, it wasn't a lazy thing about not wanting to go to the gym, but it was an added augmented layer to your choice and preference for having wellness as part of your life. Nutritional, we became a little bit more aware about health and pandemic and all this stuff. Ironically, Scott, the reason why we have things like materials, I mean, I was fascinated. I started looking at all this stuff at the time. The reason why we have hard surface materials in kitchens, the reason we have wipeable surfaces, the reason we have stuff of that nature that is very much incorporated into our households with expensive granite and marble from Italy and all this stuff, right, is because that was the outcome of how we dealt with prior pandemics. And it went through a medical environment implementation, whether it was a lab or a hospital, whatever. And then that function-based options and choices had to be elevated to another level to be brought into residential environments and high-end hospitality environments, because they needed to be a higher brow, a topper shelf kind of product. But the functions and reasons for it were right there. So from those prior pandemics, prior medical issues, we then developed this. So the natural progression to where we find ourselves today, when it comes to wellness, we want to incorporate that in there, not as only a choice from luxury, but we are now more clear on understanding that my two workouts a day, my drinking of a gallon of water, and I'm basically reciting some of the stuff from the 75 Hard program that Andy Frisella put together, right? And if nobody knows, if people don't know about that, just go download the app. Um, you're committing to 75 days of no alcohol, a gallon of water a day, two workouts, one outdoors, which is interesting. It's not all indoors, right? Reading 10 pages, and it doesn't really say what, but I like to think that for me, the 10 pages are nonfiction, right? It's personal growth, it's mindfulness, and then you what am I and then you follow some, and it doesn't specify what kind of diet or menu, but you follow a menu, a healthy menu, and you have no cheats. And here's the kicker: no alcohol, right? Now,
Right.
that is a
And there's
commitment
one
that I'm,
more.
huh?
There's one more, a
Oh
daily
yes, yeah,
progress
yes. There's
photo.
the vanity photo that you have to take every day. But it's kind of interesting. It's kind of interesting because it makes you face the reality. Like you have to take a picture every day to post on the app, not socially, but you do that for your own reference point because you can go back and look at all the pictures from before, and you can actually see. I mean, it's a personal encouragement tool, actually, right? Um, and it doesn't tell you what kind of picture. You could just do, like, whatever arm, whatever you want to do. It's something that shows progression. That is a personal choice, right? And I've had people in my life around me that basically did it, and I kind of mocked it a little bit, and I kind of, but again, I wasn't ready to embrace that aspect of my life, right? And there are people that are not necessarily older than me that have that awareness. There are people that are younger than me that actually I saw do that, and the old adage says when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, right? Now in this case, you're the student, but you're also knowledgeable because of exposure to what the teacher or the program is, and then you only apply it as a teacher to yourself when you're ready to do that, right? But once you go down that path, once you've made that commitment, it's almost like I used to say that awareness is like walking into a dark room and hitting a switch, and the light is on, right? And the lights are on. And you have this awareness, and you go through this euphoria of having, like, aha, like, I have this awareness about things, whether it's myself, my environment, my health, my mindset, what I need to do. I have this awareness. And then you're living in awareness, right? You're living in awareness. Hopefully you're not just it's not kind of a passing thing, but if you're living in awareness to where this has really taken a bit of root, because the timing is right, you have enough seasoning, you're self-guided. We all go through, like, I don't want to do that other work, and kind of like talk ourselves into self-defeated mindset. And I'm not talking about people that you have to get yourself into that, like, I'm 100% always, kind of thing. I'm sorry, it's a lot more peaceful embracing of this, right? But when you get to that point, there's a time where the awareness gets a little overwhelming. Like, it's like, I'm in awareness. I've been in awareness all this time now, right? Can I just get a day of a blip, like not being in awareness, like not living in awareness, right? And you go to where the switch was to just momentarily turn it down or dim it or something, right? And here's the truth about awareness. Somebody's drywalled over the switch.
That's good. Yeah, I was
Right?
going to
You
say the
can't turn it
electrician came
off.
in and disconnected it.
You can deny that you've experienced this, but you can't really turn it off. And in some cases, you deny it and you delay it. But if you're fortunate enough that it has taken some rooting, that gives you a foundation from which you can really grow a sturdy tree that can really spread its branches and leaves to really give you the kind of fruit of your life that you want. And you can garden that, and nurture that tree primarily for yourself. That is all health. Like, you talk about the tree of life, right? I mean, that is your health, your wellness, your protection of your peace. And when you do that, it reflects like waves ripple out of you if you're standing in that wholeness of yourself to everything around you. you become, like you said, what's your purpose? What's your motivation in this like 25 to 40 years additional of your lifespan, right? What is your motivation? And I think you and I probably have a foundationally similar, at least in part, answer to that question, which is to leave better people and situations better than you found them.
Right.
Right? To actually, not from a point of ego, but from a point of service and giving,
Right. It's
fulfill that part of
responsibility.
your soul. Yeah, we have a responsibility to impart some of what we have gathered, and as we continue to learn, because in the imparting, I think, is when how you realize you don't know as much as there's out there to know, because you're imparting what you know, but in the imparting you also find out, wait a minute, there's something else here that I haven't really looked at. So you dig deeper, you continue to be curious, you continue to increase the knowledge base, and you're imparting it freely. You're not doing it with an expectation of a return. And if you get to that point, then, are you living your purpose? Well, if that's your purpose, if that's part of your core, then yes, you're building a foundation of living your purpose, giving yourself excitement and joy from being true to your true north. And I think that aspect, whether we talk a lot, you and I, about like the education. Like a lot of people are very transactional in the way they do their business or whatever. And I don't think I've ever been transactional. I could probably benefited from being a little more transactional in terms of just productivity. But again, that's part of the lessons of life. You'll get there when you get there. But relational, without expectations, and basically providing that educational component, not from a place of ego or arrogance, but from a place of shared exchange.
Right. There's an element of, and so curiosity, you raise that up, right? Of what are the attributes of people who tend to live long, healthy lives? And one of them is they maintain curiosity. There is nothing about aging that denies you curiosity. That never goes away. Right? So long as you are living and breathing, if you are a naturally curious person, that will remain until your final breath. And if you're
You
not
know,
naturally curious, that's the more, those are the people I get most concerned about, because it's hard to continue to want to learn if you're not inherently curious. Now, I would
Scott,
say that
let me just share just one other thing while you were on this, and it's something that I experienced relative to creativity, right? So I had opportunities to basically speak in front of some classes at Pepperdine, and one of the classes that really just stuck with me, this is almost like been about 10 years ago. It was an executive MBA class, and they basically were, I was brought in to talk about, call it creative solutions that also went beyond just a report with financial numbers, but actually how does that manifest itself in a three-dimensional space? Basically, the professor had given them an opportunity, ironically, to basically do a business plan for a spa, whether it's mobile, whatever it is. And he wanted me to sort of, the crossroads of where I live in the way that I do my design business is, it's a business consultancy that manifests itself in a three-dimensional space. That environment is a stage upon which you basically perform your business successfully, and all the layers of aesthetic support your brand, your position, your aspirations, etc. So I'm sitting there and talking to the class, and they're writing and taking notes and all of this stuff. And when I was done, I said, does anybody have any questions? And one guy basically puts out his hand and says, well, how do you be creative? And it threw me. I literally, I think it threw me back to the wall. I was like, kind of leaned back on the wall. I was like, oh, that's a damn good question. I didn't, I even never even asked myself that. And I said, I don't know. You might as well ask me how to breathe, how I breathe. It's just what I do. And keep in mind, like I said, this was a later in life change of direction for me academically, right? So I said this, and then what hit me was the follow-up question. So I turned to the class and I said, well, how many of you guys in the class right now think you're creative? And like maybe there are a couple of hands that went up in the back. And I said, okay, so if I asked you that question when you were in middle school, how many of you would have said that you were creative? Almost every hand in the class went up. So exactly like we're talking about with creativity, I think the same thing exists with curiosity. I think if you really go back to a time where you had a sense of wonder, a sense of exploration, a sense of desire to find out things, whether it's instinctive, whether it's conscious, whatever, all of us had that curiosity. That's how we learned. That's how we met. We interacted with the world around us. We had things that were maybe societal, maybe familial, that basically tried to correct us and guide us into the yeses and the nos and what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. But there was always this curiosity and almost, I think, a bit of defiance. Like you're not going to deny me my curiosity. I can't speak words yet, but I'm still going to basically push it. And you know where you see that? You see that with puppies. You see that with dogs. I see it with my dog that's 8 months old that still basically tries to be defiant. And yesterday I basically realized that me trying to correct him was like being a parent that's just a critical parent. I can, there's things that I am doing out of habit to correct him just because I feel like I should correct him. And I'm looking at him and going, like, that's his free spirit. Let him be curious. As long as he's not harming himself in a way, and as long as he's not, ripping the crap out of something, allow for that curiosity. And I think it's the same thing with creativity and curiosity. So that curiosity that we're talking about, that we may have abandoned at some point or not put in a priority at some point because we have been saddled with responsibilities, life, making a living, having a family, raising kids, whatever it is. Midlife gives us an opportunity to remember, if we want, that that is part of our heritage. That's part of our inheritance. That curiosity, that creativity, that reconnection with purpose. And to your point about living longer, there are studies out there that basically say if you connect with that purpose, and I'm talking about a purpose that's meaningful for you, first and foremost, that really aligns, and alignment is a big word, right? With yourself. You just added 7 to 9 years of your life.
Right. Right. Yeah. There's all, because of all the things that come with it, right? It's not simply the purpose itself. It just brings it drags a lot of positive habits with it. And one of them is it also helps shed a lot of stress because if you have a lot of purpose in your life, you inherently are not going to have a lot of stress in terms of negative or chronic stress.
Yeah.
And maybe the other part I would add is if people feel that they aren't empowered, right? And that's what I think you and I are always trying to appeal to empowerment in our clients, in the people around us. And if you don't feel empowered, you probably feel less curious because you've been conditioned to away from asking questions and being curious. And that's what I would, I'll give a data point of one, but it was fascinating to watch. So this is my parents, a short story of my parents. So my dad was always, when he'd go into the room, was not the life of the party, but he just had this engaging smile that just people would want to talk to him. My mother was far more withdrawn. She was far more worried about what people thought about her, or and things, and tended to not have that appeal. And so I think as a couple, she always felt disempowered because her partner was the one that people gravitated to. So it kind of was self perpetuating. But interestingly, that after my father passed, so at this point, my mother would have been about 85, she became a new person because she had lost this not overbearing, but overpowering character that was always kind of, taking the spotlight, and she became a surprisingly happier person. Not that she was unhappy before. We all kind of wondered what was going on. They had a great marriage. It was no
Yeah.
reflection of performance of the marriage or lack of cooperation. It was just she became empowered for the first time, maybe in her entire life. And so, what I'm saying is, this can happen at any point in life. And so, I think that's what we're trying to think about is how do you create empowerment for yourself for the rest of your life? And that's part of the physical environment around us is taking control or taking action on that physical environment is one of the great steps that you can do when you talk about bringing that resort experience back home. right? You're creating a sense of an empowered life. And if I can do that, then I can follow it up and start to do some of these other things. Now, I want to go back and ask you, because we
Hmm.
kind of left it hanging there, on the 75 hard, which is the program,
Hmm.
75 days. So there's a reason for the 75 days, because psychologically, if you can do the 75 days, it sets you up for the rest of your life.
Well, there's that old adage about 30 days for a new habit, and in this
Right.
case, it's twice plus. Yeah,
And it's building simple things. So where are you on that 75-day journey?
21 days in.
Right. So now 21 days in, I know from talking to you, you are already experiencing significant changes in your whole view of yourself and your
Yeah.
approach to life, right?
Right, and it's not just sort of the physical impact because you definitely see definition, you definitely see the benefit, right? I mean, I told you off the air, I basically have shed 30 pounds in the last, call it 6 months, right? Part of that also is like you have to be gentle and give yourself some grace when you go through stuff. Like I lost both parents, I went through a divorce, I had a very meaningful relationship that I was in just end a few months ago. it, you go through a lot of the stuff and you have the, the human reality impact of what that does to you. It distracts you. It changes your focus. You lose interest in certain things that you used to find joy in. You haven't really taken the time, like we started in the earlier conversation about the importance of ritual and stillness. You haven't taken the time to do that radical self-inventory, as Jerry Colonna, author of Reboot, says. Doing that radical self-inventory where you really are diving into some of your old patterns. You're looking at the old stories that you tell yourself. Like you're not doing all of that stuff. So there's an impact. And that impact may not seem obvious at the time, but it's always when you look at people, when what they say, that impact takes a physical toll, takes an emotional toll. It really undermines the foundation that gives you that sense of self-confidence, the ability to take risks, calculated risks, the ability to find joy, right, and things. And you start basically getting small. So when you do something like this, when you are ready to actually do this, because when you're not ready, nobody can tell you to do it and you will be sustaining in it, right? But yes, doing that as part of the sort of radical sense inventory that I've been doing for the last few months, the understanding the reason I'm doing it is because not only do I want to and I'm ready to do it, but it's also because I see the connectivity of the benefits for myself first and foremost, and the ripple effect around me on anything that I'm involved in and people that are in my life, right? And you're doing it on your own terms. The discipline component is critical. The continuity component is critical. Have there been days where it's like, oh, I don't want to do those two friggin' workouts today? Absolutely, right? But you figure out a way to do it. I take my dog for a walk for my 45 minutes of outdoors, right? Uh, I'm incorporating a fitness space in my house with the additional added on of like an infrared sauna. But infrared sauna is not a luxury thing. The infrared sauna in this case is a recovery component to working out, right? So I'm building this thing, and again, I've been fortunate enough, even though when I was not ready to basically embrace it, I was fortunate enough to have people in my life that actually showed me by example, right? So I have that as a reference point. Not that I'm emulating exactly what they've done, but I'm custom designing something for me as a design for my life. And I will tell you, Scott, it's interesting because I'm 21 days in, right? So for me to be sustaining this program for 75 days, I still have at least half of the program to do, right? So in less than 14 days, I will be on a plane flying to Africa for about 10 days to 12 days of a photo safari. So imagine the fact that I am obviously looking forward to that, but there is a commitment in my mind of how am I going to sustain this program while I'm on safari in Africa, right?
Right. It's
And
inconvenient.
well,
But
yes, but I already have a game plan. Even if I don't have one piece of equipment that's available for me as far as workout. I have enough thoughts in my mind about what I can do to get in that 45 minute of a workout using body weight, physical exercises, push-ups, squats, sit-ups, finding something heavy and doing some, side step, lunges or whatever, right? Even if I don't have that. And I think there's not going to be a problem of basically me doing the outdoor 45 minutes because I'm going to be outdoors, right? It's like I'll be outdoors with the big 5 game.
well, especially when the tigers start to chase you. But
Well, I said that my personal trainer brought that up today when I was doing my workout with him, and I said, but here's the thing. He said, well, be careful because we're going to Zimbabwe and Botswana. We're going to do the Victoria Falls, and then there's going to be like a water plane that we land in Botswana. And so I told him, I said, well, I don't have to outrun the tiger. I just have to outrun the other person. Right?
right, that's right.
So being in better physical condition with 30 pounds less makes it easier for me to outrun the other person. So there you go. There's a benefit of having basically being on the 75 hard thing. But I'm already in my mind, not counting on the fact that there may be a gym or not. And I'm already in my mind figuring out how I can do that. So I actually have a TRX band system that I can attach to any door or to a post or whatever.
That's
It's a
what I was
travel.
going to say. You could take some bands because
Right.
they travel
Right.
really easily, right?
Right. Right. I have a TRX system that I can do squats, push-ups, whatever on, other than the ones that I can do like bench reverse push-ups or whatever. And then I can actually find some sort of weight and work with that as a dumbbell if I need to. So I can literally take a little sash that has that stuff in it and literally put it in my backpack. And now I have basically continued my commitment to actually fulfill my commitment of 75 days on this program. And what's ironic is I'm not looking forward to ending the program at 75 days. Like alcohol was never really a big issue for me. So that one, which I think a lot of people may struggle with if that's part of their life, I was never a big issue to me. My big issue was getting the workouts in. The reading is not a big issue. The eating, yeah, I've got ways around making sure that I'm not eating stupid stuff. But the alcohol is not an issue. And I'm thinking, I'm already not thinking about this as being a 75 days of doing something. I'm looking at this as being just a regular thing that happens in my life.
Well, it
21
ties
days
right
in.
back to the example as you were talking about awareness in the room, right? The light has been switched on.
I
The
can't find
idea
the
of
switch to
switching
turn
it
it off
off
anymore.
is, yeah, it loses appeal, ironically. And that's the importance of the discipline of every day and for some period of time. And I think your example is a great one to say, once you actually commit to a discipline that's reasonable, these are relatively low bars that you should be able to do for a period of time, but you commit to do it. It's surprising how easy it is to change habits when you get a program that's reasonable and you're ready to do it and you're ready to follow through, because as you get through it, you realize you start feeling better and like, I don't want to be that person I was before I started.
And I'll tell you, I didn't think it was reasonable. I thought it was a little um, too regimented and structured, like it was trying to tell you what to do, kind of thing. And what back at the day when I basically first was exposed to it, I think there's a lot to be said about when you're ready.
Right.
But I think there's a lot to be said about if somebody actually this is another aspect of what you and I, with the education component, and not where it's formal education or like consulting, but I think sharing your experience with a certain amount of authenticity and vulnerability. Like it's one thing for me to say to somebody, "Oh, you should have a home gym and you should put this stuff in it," as a designer. But as a person who's living my truth, and I'm, not to use like a hair club for men kind of reference, but I'm not only am I the president, but I'm also a client. if you are coming at this from a position of authenticity and vulnerability in talking about it and being not necessarily private, personal, but personable and sharing, like you shared about your parents, right? I'm, you know, I can share about my parents. Uh, if you're willing to share that as part of your reality, part of your authenticity, then you're gonna come across as a trustworthy and probably an inspiration for somebody else, at least to where you have shared it without an expectation of return on that share. And whenever they are ready to maybe hear that and their own way, through their own filters, the way that really applies to them and how they want to manifest it, that is something that you have basically given with grace and generosity and without an expectation of a return. And you have done that from a position of being human and true to yourself.
Yeah, yeah. It, it's it's hard to imagine until you're there, and I think that's the gap, and that's what I like about programs like the one you're doing is follow this, and it will lead you there. It'll be your own unique there, but it's hard to. You see people get frustrated, and they're not sure why they're frustrated. They're not fulfilled, but they don't know. They are pursuing things that ultimately won't fulfill them. But there's, whether it's shopping or, all the things that can occupy your focus. But no, I think the message here is really around this life looking forward, right? And that's why I kind of wanted to talk to you about where you are in your stage of life, which is really new opportunities are opening up now. And you've clearly put your hand on the door and opened some doors to say, I'm ready to try something new.
I think Scott, yes, and I think it's a convergence of a whole bunch of stuff, and I think it happens to people at different age. Like people will say, I'm going through. It's not correct terminology, but I'm going through a midlife crisis at 50 or at 40 or whatever, right? I didn't have an issue at 50. 50 was, I looked at it as being, hey, I just made 50. This is all bonus time now,
Yeah.
right? And with that attitude, even though I wasn't really clear, I was being a little bit flippant about it. Um, so the intentionality and the clarity wasn't necessarily there, but I was living, this is all extra. So I said yes to everything that came my way. I said yes to a podcast that I've been doing for 10 years. I said yes to basically, being an ambassador for a custom clothing company, and that asked me to basically be part of a group that walked runway at the age of 50. And I'm like, okay, you know, and so I said yes to all this stuff. I said yes to a personal relationship that basically was just very dynamic and engaging and passionate. And I said yes to community, and I said yes to continuing to be involved in more nonprofits, more organizations like National Aging in Place on a board at that time. I just said yes to everything. So take that saying yes to everything, and even though looking back, I took it to an extreme, and maybe there was a part of that was also escapism, because I was also parallel line going through grieving for my mom's, being diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, and sort of that anticipatory grief that I didn't even have a term for to understand. My father, then after that, with dealing with Parkinson's and dementia, after we lost my mom, my sister and I basically caring for him. So I was saying yes. What started off as being because it's bonus, I just turned 50, and this is just extra. Hey, I made it to the 50 line. Now this is all extra. It's like extra credits on a pinball machine. Bing, bing. You just got another
This is a
thing for
free
those.
play. Yeah.
Free play. Yeah. Um, that being said, it then became an escape thing. But that thing about recognizing that you are in a place where you have a gift. You're being given a gift. You've been given an opportunity. And again, it can happen at any point in your life, right? You're looking at that transformational transition the change, the uncertainty that's now basically turned you on your upside down and kind of like took you off kilter. If you look at that as as an opportunity and a gift from sort of the universe, the higher power, whatever you want to call it, to look deeper, to engage from a point of refresh, from a reset, it's amazing where that journey could take you. And then to abandon the fact that you have to know where that is going to take you and just go for the ride and commit to the doing, like in the case of the exercise, doing what you may not want to do, but still doing it, then it builds that discipline. I mean, I always consider myself to be self-motivated, always consider myself that it's just, this is just a normal muscle, right? Until I basically got saddled with so much that I had to feel completely deflated, kind of lost, not really clear what the purpose is, what was the point anymore, what's next, is this all that there is? All those questions basically overwhelmingly, in addition to just having to understand that you got to sit still long enough to do that radical self-inventory, sit still long enough to allow yourself to grieve, allow yourself to be in the grief versus avoiding the grief, accepting reality of life versus what you want it somehow to be, and still feel empowered by taking those decisions. That is a gift that we are given when things change, but especially in midlife, like at 60 or at 55 or at 40, whatever, some people don't ever look at it that way. And it's a missed opportunity.
Yeah, the more you've been kind of on a track, the longer, for whatever reason, I think the harder it is, the more you've ventured off, the easier it is, right? So it's one of those. It's easy to suggest to people who are used to doing it. Oh, sure. And the ones who's never did, we could say it's sheltered or whatever the routine has been so rigid. It's really hard to imagine giving that up. Let me switch gears now, and as we kind of wind it up here and talk about Rad Life, because I think this is a fun project that clearly has been a piece of work you've been fostering for several years, and I've been able to kind of watch you do this. And as you shared a lot of your life kind of experience leading through all this, where are you going with Rad Life, and kind of talk about what it is and what you see down the road?
So it's perfect segue because the Rad Life wasn't something that was on my radar ever, like consciously, right?
Right.
You're just living your life, you're doing all this stuff, and never really thought about it that way. I mean, I've been on social media and on the internet since 94, the days of AOL and paying $1 a minute, or using the 10 free hours on the CD that you got from a magazine. And so at that point in time, when you were basically paying $1 a minute, everything from the caliber of the people that you interacted with, the way that you basically interacted with people, it was a point of contact, and then it went to a real in real life. And we know where we are today. But a lot of people are very in contact, but not really connected, right? And the world is what it is. But
In contact but not connected. I think that's a really good way to put it.
right, and it's super true because you have to put yourself in a point of vulnerability when you're interacting with somebody in person. When you're interacting from the opposite side of a screen or a laptop or whatever the hell it is, there's an anonymity factor that works in your favor and and to your disadvantage. And not to go down all the way that all permeates, and how people are being fed what they're being fed what is in them already and being reinforced with the algorithms, versus actually being exposed to alternating points of view, to a non-siloed mindset, to regardless of that, you and I basically remember a time when you basically you made mixtapes. There was analog before MP3s, before there was even a Walkman. I still have LPs, and I also have Spotify, but we are able to bridge those two
Right.
things. But we also, more importantly, we also remember the time when it wasn't. And we remember some of the benefits looking back now with wisdom. We remember some of the benefits that we didn't even realize back then, not to try to be nostalgic, but there were actually healthier ways of living, right? Meaningful connection, having to put yourself out there. So with the Rad Life, what happened is at 50, which I was saying, I think like I turned 50, I went in and basically was a guest on somebody's show, just like here. The guy didn't really do his homework about me. I started talking about things like aging in place and staying in people's homes for they stayed longer because when I was talking about commercial stuff, it was way over his head. So I thought, in respecting his time and that he's paying for airtime, let me talk about something that may be more appealing to his listeners. And he was a general contractor doing homes. So I started out like that. Again, didn't really resonate with him. This is 10 years ago. So it would have been 2015, right? And nobody was talking about aging. We're in Southern California. Nobody talks about changes of seasons.
Nobody gets old in Southern California.
I guess all in Southern California. We have an obsession with youth. So I had an opportunity from the guy who had the radio station. He said to me, well, we've been thinking about doing a baby boomer show. We want to do a baby boomer show. And I was saying yes to everything. I said, sure. I never really thought about it. The closest I ever thought about it was to maybe do like voiceovers like Mel Blanc or something, or like, right. And I said, but sure, why not? Let's do that. And I said, I'll do it month to month. And we started with Casey Kasem's daughter and elder abuse and all of that stuff. And then we talked about all kinds of things. And in the course of that, I was interviewing people that were of interest. What started off being sort of focused on aging turned into being a focus on what was interesting to me as I got older. And so I had some people on there. And then when I got the opportunity to do this, I went on Facebook and I asked people to recommend names for the show. And there was like 82 suggestions. And then I said, okay, the natives are getting restless because I haven't selected one yet. So I'm going to have plausible deniability. I'm going to ask them to select. And they ended up selecting the Rad Life. And my name is spelled RAAD. And it sounds like ROD, but people want to call it Rad. Again, I live in a surf town in San Clemente. They radical Rad bike, RAD. Anyway, so it became the Rad Life. And we rolled out the show with that name. And over the years, as I continued to post things on Facebook or whatever, and like I said to you, I was asked to basically, do this ambassador thing for a clothing guy. And I would sit here like this, and it's like, I'm having a cup of coffee. It's a work day. And I would post about something like reflections on what I'm thinking or something like that. And people would go, yeah, of course you are. It's the Rad Life. So it became a descriptor. Okay. So I just stopped. I stopped fighting it. I'm like, okay, fine. I wasn't really leaning into it from to try to monetize it or anything like that, because believe it or not, I never actually had anybody pay to be on my show. I never tried to monetize it. It became a point of exploration for me to sit down and connect with somebody on a weekly basis. We have about 280 hours of content at this point, right? And it became this show. And it was a way for me in the middle of the week, Wednesday at 12 o'clock, to basically sit down live, not really prepared much, knowing enough about the person I'm sitting with, but not really having a scripted thing, to have an organic conversation, just like you and I are having. Whatever rabbit hole looks like it's interesting, we'll go explore that. It was a very fulfilling experience. But like most things that basically you do without clarity and intentionality, after doing it for 10 years, it became a little stale. It became a little rote, right? I lost the reason of why we were doing it, right? Because what started off as being empowering people that are boomers, and in an indirect way trying to prepare myself for what I was going to maybe face with my parents, getting that education on the air in real time and sharing it, again, leaving people that are listening better than we found them, appealing to that core thing. I just became stale. I was just filling airtime at that point, right? And I didn't really care for that. Also, it became sort of stale in terms of the quality of the production, because what started off in 2015 one way When COVID hit, everybody turned the camera on themselves and using Zoom became a podcaster. So the environment in which I was producing this thing or doing this show started to conflict with me in terms of where I was growing in terms of digital production. It needed to be more. It needed to be more interesting to me. It needed to be a little bit more multifaceted as far as an evolution of this thing that I'm doing. It's like riding a bicycle with training wheels and then going to a banana shaped, bicycle and cruising the neighborhood. Next thing you know, you're on a street bike. And like it's just a step up kind of thing, just because that's natural evolution. So what happened when I hit 60, on the tail end of all that sort of personal um, unsettlement, I equally had a similar feeling about my design business, which I had been doing now for 25, 24 years, individually under my own flag for 21 years. It just became old hat. And I wasn't clear on what to do. And I'm looking at 30 years maybe ahead of me. And I'm going, what do I do here? Like, I'm not going to just sit down and read books all day. I'm not going to. And ironically, part of the challenge there was because I was so focused for the last 10 years, let's say, on I stepped away from the joy of the journey to the joy of, or the happiness to be achieved from the outcome, from the destination. And I'm using those words specifically, happiness and joy, because happiness is what you get from setting a goal and achieving it. And that's you. That's a personal thing. Joy is what you get from experience with the journey and people around you. It's a give versus a take. Happiness is more of a take.
And
Joy is
happiness
more of a give.
is much shorter in duration.
Right, exactly. And what happens when you achieve that goal? It's done. So the journey, the joy of a process is sometimes clouded by being too focused on the outcome.
Right.
And I did that professionally. I did it because I felt that was a way of measuring my self-worth in the eyes of others. I'm trying to benchmark what society tells me is of value. I did that personally to the detriment of some personal relationships, where I basically was so focused on the result and the outcome that I lost the ability to find joy in the daily and the process. Right. But again, we all go through our own chrysalis, as Chip Donnelly puts it. It's our chrysalis, where you turn from a caterpillar to that monarch butterfly.
Right.
And when you come out of that chrysalis, your wings are sticky, and you still got to take a minute and sit in the sun and dry them up. Like, you can't just go to flight immediately, right? The stillness is still important. So what happened when I was confronted by this, when I was jarred into reality by some events that took place, is I had a choice to make. And I think when you're at 60, and if you are fortunate to have in your core engine some things that you may not even be aware of, but are working in your benefit, I turned that energy into trying to figure out what next. And so I drank from a fire hose of stuff, literally books and self-exploration. And it's a tough mirror sometimes to look at. And, mirroring to see yourself in that mirror through other people's eyes or your own is a tough one. But you do the stuff that you don't necessarily want to do, because you understand at some core level that what you're doing here is for your benefit at the end, and everything and everybody whose life you touch. So I started looking at what can we do. And I came up with the idea, with the help of some people, of elevating the Raad Life brand. Right? Elevating it to where it now has a purpose beyond just me sitting around for an hour and having a conversation with somebody, but building on that. So it's an evolving of that. But then also, how do I tie that with my business? And I realized, and I went to a retreat in Santa Fe for MEA, Modern Elder Academy, And I realized that there were people, there was like 200, not 200, 22 people in my cohort. And there was a few of them that were in their 70s. And there was one guy that was like in his 30s, like 32 years old. So it wasn't even age related. It was where you're at and what you're dealing with in life. And I realized that this angst that we are going through, that we're sharing, this midlife, uh, mucky middle, as they call it, is something that I could basically craft into the Raad Life. Having the focus being on this transformational period, but from a position of empowerment, and also from a position of a Generation X, which has basically been skipped over, and hell no, we're not going to take that anymore, right? And we're not going to accept what you tell us aging is like, and we're not going to basically accept that what society tells us is the only option, right? It's not a Del Webb or an assisted living. It's there are other things that we're going to do. And generationally, what's interesting about this is the more you dig into Generation X, is nobody really gave us a roadmap for success. Nobody really sat us down and hovered around us as parents. You were told to go outside and figure it out. You were told to go drink from that water hose, not the bottled water. You were basically told that you didn't. Nobody really told us, especially the older ones of us, like, you may have ADHD or you may have something like this, and here's something that will help you focus. You were always like, you would do better. You would do well, but you have a lot of potential, but you're not applying yourself, right? So all of that. So we learned how to be resilient. We learned how to reinvent. And along the way, those God-given inherited things that are generational with us, we forgot because we bought into sort of the conveniences, the ease of life, understandably, but we forgot, and that muscle stopped being really consciously being us being aware of. So what can the Raad Life do to represent that and remind people of that and be a platform for those voices of people that are willing to share from a point of vulnerability and authenticity with courage their own personal experiences from their perspectives, whether you are a person who's a lobbyist in DC, which I have an article from, or you're a person who's a personal trainer, or whether you're a person that is transitioning from being, where you got kids on one side, you got grandparents, you got parents on the other side, but you just went through a year of not working because you went and took care of your parents or stayed with your parents, and then basically not realizing it at the time, but looking back at that 1 year of not working in a formalized manner and the benefits that came out of that, right? It's like, so you slowed down long enough to reflect. So what can the Raad Life do to do that? And at the same time, empower people by presenting options of how you can design your life in terms of your physical environment, in terms of your home, in terms of your business, in terms of things of that nature, right? What can you do to enrich the layering of your life by saying yes to things like, I don't know, I said yes to basically leading a core group of 225 motorcycles off the Huntington Beach Pier in a 67 Cadillac with the mayor of Huntington Beach sitting next to me, in order to support the men's gentleman's ride, or the distinguished gentleman's ride, which basically supports prostate cancer awareness for men, and it was actually originally founded in Australia. Saying yes to being on a small helicopter to take a pilot experience with a small company that teaches helicopter piloting over the city of Los Angeles, right? Like, going back to saying that was the same reason why I said yes, though it was within a group of people from graduate school, to being certified as a scuba diver, to saying yes to things like that, right? So how do you share that by your own example? Not because you're pretending to do something in order to capture it and put it in a magazine or to put it out in a digital format, but it's because you're sharing of yourself, right? And we live in a world that shares so much, but it shares it from a perspective of 8 by 10 glossy, curated, not with the authenticity and exposure a little bit within, strategically, but to basically give an insight and share from a point of authenticity. So the Rad Life now is almost completed. We're almost ready to launch. It'll probably be by beginning of August. A digital magazine that will basically have the majority of the stuff will be articles for people, but it will also be a platform that will provide some resources for like things that I basically not necessarily I'm recommending because there's a financial value. I'm sharing that this is stuff that I do. Here's some resources where it is, whether it's my infrared sauna, whether it's this electric assist bicycle that I have that I really enjoy because it appeals to me as a designer. It was something that was designed by a former BMW engineer, but it also is something that gives me a sense of being able to fulfill my life in terms of my health and wellness and my regimen of doing that. There's just things that are superly simple that share, but also providing some possibilities, even by just sharing by example, possibilities for coaching, like transformational coaching, personal training, energy work, things of that nature. Rad reads kind of bookcase of things like, what are those books that are behind you? Here are some of these books that I basically have read, and I really enjoyed them, and it's where I'm at in life, and just sharing from that personal place, but sharing something of meaning. So the Rad Life is going to become that element, and also infused in there will be some of my design stuff, because it's not necessarily, yes, there'll be some advertising in there, but it's more about, hey, did you know about this resource? But like, for example, we have in this issue, or this inaugural evergreen that's going to be on there as far as the actual flippable issue, we have discussions, a little bit discussion about ADUs. We have a discussion about how people are taking their second story in their homes and turning it into a full living environment, because then it gives access to the downstairs for multi-generational households, right? It's an existing thing versus a new build. We have the fact that people are hybriding work at home, and they're kind of tired of sitting on a dining room chair, and they would like an environment which basically is conducive to them for them to feel like they're engaged in that part of their life as part of the overall complexity of what's happening in the house. A wellness space where you have incorporated into your bathroom remodel an actual fitted in a sauna, and some therapy experiential shower elements that are in the shower, body jets, stuff of that nature, a space that could accommodate a massage table, so we're going to touch on some of that stuff, that's sort of designs that you can incorporate in your life, but that's the platform where it is. And in doing that, I have a refreshed or a reinvigorated look at where I'm at, a curiosity, but also a platform from which to share this stuff. So it appeals to that thing we were talking about educating or just leaving people better than you found them. Where is that journey going to go? I really don't know. My eye is not still on where the outcome of that is, because it's really funny when I share that with people, Scott. The reaction is, excluding somebody, family members, they're like, well, but is there a market for that? That's the first thing that comes out of their mouth is there a market for that? How are you going to monetize that, right? And I'm and those are real realities for a lot of people, like that. You're spending energy and resources on something. What's your result? What's your return on this investment, right? Right now, the return on this investment for me is the process. And what life has shown me, if anything, is that when I basically take my eye a little bit off what success looks like, by defining success as being the end result, the ambitious top of the mountain, right? If that's my only way of defining success, and I stop defining success is my finding joy and curiosity in a daily engagement with something, or a range of different things. When I stop doing that is when I get myself in trouble. When I basically am looking at a return on investment My return on investment right now in this is the taking of the journey. What is my return on investment of going on safari to Africa? I don't have a checklist of checking off all the big five, right?
Right.
Taking the journey is what's going to be. I am not looking at taking any digital element with me other than maybe my phone or a tablet and probably leaving it alone. I've already talked to the guy that was doing the tour and I said, I don't want to bury my head in my phone taking pictures. Let's arrange for a photographer to join us, right? And that way we can capture, but we can be in the real, in the now, in, to quote Tolle's book, right? Being in the now, experiencing it, not being so worried about trying to capture it and then filter it through all the filters on Instagram or Canva or whatever to basically show it in an 8x10 glossy. And the thing that I'm happiest about taking along with me, other than the fact that I'm taking as little as possible. I am basically living out of a duffel bag or something of that nature, and that's it, right? They've already told me there's laundry. I said, that's terrific. We're done. I'm just, here's my
Yeah,
laundry.
it has the elements as you talk about it, um, of really the things you can bring back and use in everyday life. People think about it as the experience of going somewhere and having that, and then coming back to the norm that they left behind. The reality is, there's a new norm available to all of us that is full of new opportunities. And I think that's, yeah, as you talk about the Rad Life, one of the things I'm hearing in it, it's that space between the 3 second clip of something that doesn't really give you much information, or the deep dive. Well, I'm not ready to commit to all of that. Like, there's enough here to say, sounds like there's some content that has some depth, that if you've got enough information from it, now you can go start asking some more questions. That's what I tell people from an education standpoint. As an educator, you know, we're speaking to people who are intelligent, mature, they've got a lot of years of experience. You don't need me to tell you the answer. The best thing I can do for you is help you ask richer questions to get
You
to
know
where
what?
you want to go.
You know what you just did, Scott, and shout out to Jerry Colonna, who's we're continuing to have the podcast also for the Rad Life, by the way, but it's just elevating the kind of guests that we're having on it. Like this is me being on your show, and again, thank you for having me. But this is sort of the conversations we now want to have, right? And so
Right.
Jerry, who wrote Reboot and Reunion, he's working on his third book. He says exactly that. He says it infuriates Dick when he's doing coaching for some people. It infuriates the heck out of some people that he's doing coaching for because he's not giving them the answer. They're like, they come to him and say, well, what should I do? And he's not giving them the answer. What he's doing is he's asking them questions to have them ask themselves better questions.
Yeah.
And isn't that the truth of where the rubber meets the road? Right?
Well, I'll go one more, and I'll tell you, I don't always do it, but I'll start off when I'm giving a talk. Everything I'm going to tell you in the next 45 minutes is wrong. All that's in question is how wrong. Hopefully not too far wrong, but that's life, in terms of, because I don't claim to have all the answers and you don't
Right.
have all the answers, but
Right.
together maybe we'll get a little bit closer to reality, and that's okay.
Right. And what you're doing is, again, we talk about this, like you're sharing your aspect of it, but you're sharing it without the need for people to basically follow. You're sharing it just to basically add to the conversation. And again, when somebody is ready, they will take what they heard and apply what they want and start their own journey of discovery and exploration out of curiosity that works for them. And then that will lead them to wherever it leads them. But I think we don't we and add to that another layer where we come at things from a position of fear and scarcity versus from a position of abundance and possibility, right? And we basically, again, try to control the uncontrollable. So we're afraid that the outcome is, and my mother, God rest her soul, loved her, but she basically had this thing about, if you don't assume the worst, then if you assume the worst as part of your preparation, then you will never be surprised. Where the truth of that matter is twofold. when man makes plans, God laughs. So as much as you think you're going to basically prepare yourself for the worst that you can think of, it could still be outshined by worse than that. So that's one. Two, and you may get really good at it and that not happen, but that's always an option. That's always a possibility. Two, if your approach is to think of the worst, to come at it from a position of fear and scarcity, then you're already abandoning the fact that there's possibility and abundance. And that's going to color the way that you take those steps along the journey. It's not the same as taking the steps along the journey with openness and curiosity and then adjusting to the realities of the situation because you're also realistic. But there's a difference between realistic and being in advance out of worry or fear and scarcity, also being a pessimist indirectly, but not calling yourself that, right? So it's
Yeah. Right.
there is the need to basically share, or the responsibility, even more than the need, to share your own personal perspective on something. I think if you're the kind of person that feels drawn to that kind of openness and vulnerability, you can do it. I mean, we've probably lost a lot of people just listening to this show like as long as it's gone. But again, to your point about the space between the 30 seconds and the deeper dive, the word storytelling these days is a very big word. Everybody uses it as basically you're storytelling. Yeah, storytelling is not storytelling from my perspective when it's a 30-second thing. That's a trailer. Okay. When you're basically telling people, this is the book about my life and it's like this, people don't remember Cliff Notes. That's Cliff Notes. That's not storytelling. So
Right. Right.
for taking a deeper dive, taking the long road, part of the experience of doing that is the engagement with the person that you're dealing with. And that is part of the value as much as anything that is being imparted. The conversation itself is part of the value. So the Rad Life is trying to basically find a balance of sharing some of this stuff, and not just from my perspective, but from as many voices that are willing to basically put themselves in that position of sharing. And there's a lot of people that are like that. The minute you open that door and you approach people from that perspective, and you give them a little bit of direction of what you're basically trying to do, it's amazing how many people, especially in this midlife space that we're in, that feel like they want to share.
For sure. Yeah, I see it all the time, right? It's again, we've got enough life experiences, and it's not that it's necessarily right or wrong, but they realize, how do we learn? Through other people's lives experiences far more than what we learn in textbooks.
So how do we maybe you were wrapping up here a little bit. How do we how do we leave people wanting to do this or encourage them to do this? Again, realizing that when you're ready, you're ready. When you're not, you're not. And give yourself a little grace that if it's something that you want to do, that you'll get to it when it's time for you to do it, because that's really the only time it's meaningful and it will take and have traction that's meaningful in your life. How do we do that, Scott? How do we help people empower themselves to take that step? Because a lot of people, I think, are in a place where they feel like they want to do something, but they may not know what that is.
I think it's a combination of a couple of things. I'm sure it's more than this, but always, I try to simplify as much as I can. Is one is, which I mentioned earlier, is here are some opportunities. Whether you can identify with them today or not, don't worry about that part. But these are some opportunities that other people are doing. That's partly how I educate: is see what this 95-year-old is doing, see what this 100-year-old is doing.
Yeah.
Not that that needs to be you, but to realize there's, where you are today. Wow, that's a long time from now. There's lots I could be doing in that gap. And then I think the other is, which that's why I wanted to talk to you about the program you're doing, is people need some way to get going. It's the getting off of where I am and getting started on the right path. You will adjust accordingly, but it's and I could put it in the context of why is this not a 20-minute podcast? It's a long format podcast so that we can have these deeper conversations that aren't just A, B, C, D. There you go, take the recipe, and by the way, buy my product or whatever on the side.
Right.
And so, if you're buying into long format for life, which is kind of say, what's the destination that you have in mind? And it's not that it's about the destination. It helps you give you some direction of my journey is going this direction versus just my journey is what I decide when I wake up and it moves around in the course of a day. Yeah, that always, there's a certain amount of that. But what's missing for people, and I think you kind of touched on it earlier, was the elements that we learned years ago that actually have value, enduring value, and the conveniences of today. How do we pick the best of all of those, right? And start to apply them. It's not to say that about nostalgia or it's not about, what's flashy and new is always best. It's we're old enough and we're smart enough. We should be able to step back and say, so what are the elements that I need to be reminded of? I always say when I learned to golf and once I got reasonably good at it, the game then became about remembering what I'd forgotten about my golf swing. And that was usually where most of the openings happen. But anyway, we have to wrap it up. Raad, this conversation went in again like every conversation in a direction I never know where it's going to go, and that's what makes it interesting. But I think the vulnerability that you've shared today is really really valuable for people, and that's part of it too, is to help people have the conversation, right, with another person, not just in your head. There's a lot of value in that.
But I think in order to have a conversation with another person, which you definitely, if you are open enough to let the conversation lead you, you will get more value out of that exchange simply for the exchange, and it may surprise you where it goes. Take that from a perspective of somebody that is sitting here talking to you, and you've experienced this yourself, or somebody who's been a host for a podcast for 10 years, almost on a weekly basis, and had multiple different people sitting there, and there's a value in taking that versus being so controlled about where you want this thing to go and where you want it to end, that you now the alternative is don't be so loose, like have a direction, like you said, you don't, not waking up every morning and deciding where you're going to go that day, but having also a thread that goes through in terms of that speaks to your true north or to your purpose. Like what is it that what ignites your passions, what gives you joy, what do you feel like gratitude for having be part of at the end of the day. And if that is a consistent, then the journey along the way, the long form that we're talking about, the conversation that isn't basically a 30 seconds and that's just presented in a very nice little clear little thing and put it out. Be willing to show how the sausage is made, how things are happening, how the interaction and the relationship is building. Those things are at the very least equally valuable to what the end result is. And in some cases, that path less traveled, that direction that you are in, but not so rigid that you are not able to explore along the way, that has as much value as the end result. And I think sometimes we have gotten ourselves in, because the convenience, the speed, the fastness of everything happening. And it's not getting any slower, it's just getting faster. We have forgotten the value in not only embracing the narrative of the past. No, that's not what we're talking about here, I think, you and I. We're saying you get to pick how you want to craft and design your life. And if there are things in the past that are still valid and noteworthy today, just because they are rooted in the past, doesn't mean that they have to be abandoned just for whatever is the latest and the newest,
Right.
and vice versa.
Because you can't do it all anyway. So recognizing you can't do it all, you have to make conscious. You're making choices either by the moment with no direction, or you're making conscious choices around some journey in terms of where you're trying to move towards, and constantly adjusting where that aim is as you're going. But it's got some wholeness about it, and I think that's again things that happen when you start to build awareness, which is really what you talked about, right? Is I think that's such a big
Once
part of it,
once
and it's
that's
so
once
hard
that
to
switch is
explain until you're there.
once that switch is on, man, you can't find it to turn it off.
Yeah,
And I will be the first person to say that there are some days when you want ignorance to be bliss, but that you cannot turn that switch off because somebody friggin' drywalled over that switch and did such a great job that you can't even see the patch. You don't know where the electricity is, and the lights are on. So the only thing you can do is, in order to avoid the awareness, is you have to sit in the darkness of your own self because you have just chosen to close your eyes.
right.
And if you don't, then that's the case. I want to I just want to say something, you're talking about here too, is you wrote something in your book when you send me a copy. And to your point where you said you can't do it all. Yes, that's true. So knowing your limitations is also not a place where it means that's where you end. Knowing your limitations is a space where you can basically build from, right? Knowing your limitations is important because based on the fact, let's just take weightlifting, for example. My limitations is doing a 40, or 20-pound dumbbell. To go to a 40-pound dumbbell is not going to do anything for me other than discourage me from doing even the 30 or 40-pound dumbbell. If I basically understand that my limitation is that 20-pound dumbbell and I work up in 5-pound increments, I'm more likely to be able to achieve that 40-pound dumbbell. But I have to give myself the room, the grace, and the space to get there, right? So yes, we cannot do everything. But I think also we can probably do more than we think we can.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Right?
I say this all the time. Most of us don't come anywhere near to our capacity. So
So
that's a really
don't
simple
let
example.
your yeah don't let the fact that you have limited time or whatever kind of gauge you towards not being to the reality. Oh well, I can't do everything. That's true, but you can do more than you think you can. But being clear on where you are and where you may be curious enough to go and explore, that's kind of the fun. That's the kind of the journey. I mean, I was telling you about the Africa thing and packing all this stuff. So I wanted to take a book with me. I wanted to take a book with me. I don't know, it's not going to be your book, but I wanted to take a book with me to Africa because I wanted a physical book that actually I could read, right?
Yeah.
I imagine myself sitting out there with animals, the sun is going down, and I'm reading a book, right? And realizing I have to take my glasses with me too because I probably, I'm getting to the point where I need to have readers. The book I picked to take with me is The Green Hills of Africa by Ernest Hemingway,
Okay.
which again is not a story, a novel. It is a journal reflections of his 1 month spent on safari with his wife in Africa.
Interesting. Yeah.
Right. So I wanted to get a voice in my head while I'm there that was authentic, even though that book was probably written in like 19, I think it was written in 1956 or sorry, 36 or something like that. Like it's an older book. But I wanted to take that with me because I'm layering that experience. I'm going on that journey with Ernest Hemingway, and I will not read it until I get there. So this is sort of the thing. But learning where you're at, investing in yourself, and accepting that that is part of developing that muscle if you find value in it, and doing what you don't necessarily want to do or that's hard to do, and getting yourself in that discipline. Thank you, Andy Frisella, for the program. I did not appreciate it when I was first introduced to it, but I appreciate it very much now. I appreciate the person who introduced me to it very much as well. But you wrote something in this that I want to just kind of end with, right? Because what you wrote in there said, you wrote and you addressed it to me. You said, Rod, invest in what matters. And that includes you. And then, you just did your little generational thing with it, keep rocking it. So, keep rocking it. But yeah, we need to invest in what matters. And as much as it is about people around us, as much as this will work, if you don't invest in yourself, as to your own words, and that includes you, then we don't have the foundation to basically build on.
Right. Yeah, it's if you're planning to do something for others bigger than you, you have to invest in you to be able to do that. Right? It's not an ego-based drive. It's really around. It allows you to have more capacity to be able to do more for others. So that's where that comes from, and that's just one of that was unique. I don't think I've written that in anyone else's. I just thought it was a good fit for you.
You sure you don't say that to everybody?
I guarantee I don't say that to everybody.
No, it very much is. And if you're a person that's kind of grown up where you're basically almost overgiving, right? You're sort of, you pride yourself on that selflessness. You're part of a larger family structure, maybe you also, is a way for you to, like an attachment style or whatever, where you're basically a giver, you're basically of service, whatever, right? But you're not clear on the fact that as much as that is part of what you're embracing as part of your persona, that you have to care for yourself, and you have to invest in yourself, and you have to be able to sit with yourself and in the stillness of yourself and mirroring what is going on in your life, accepting both that sort of good side of you and sort of the dark side of you, or the shadow, as Jung basically put it. Those are things that you have to do for yourself. You have to invest in yourself, because if you don't have that as a foundation, you cannot be a stable, grounded whole that other people can depend on, feel safe with, not feel overwhelmed by, because you are basically self-maintained, you're self-sustained, but you're also with boundaries, but you're also permeable. Those boundaries are permeable. You're also there for people, but you got to be there for yourself. You got to take the time to do that. And it's not an easy journey. Sometimes it may be even more like you may need more courage to do that than to actually basically reflect outwards. But you got to do that. So you got to invest in yourself. So thank you for the book, buddy, and thank you for the very unique, autographed copy of it. I really enjoyed your book. I will continue to read it, and I really, really appreciate this time spent with you.
Thanks, Rod. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I think we have a follow-up on a few things we've teased out that are to be continued at a future date, and we'll maybe get into one of the other topics that you and I are interested in on the next visit. So thank you. Good luck, and have a wonderful time in Africa. Looking forward to some photos.
Thanks, buddy. Absolutely. And again, thanks for having me on. I'm really happy to spend the time with you. More than happy to have you on my show too, once we kind of kick that off again at that elevated level, because these conversations not only are important for other people maybe, but I find that when we have them, we get a little bit deeper. We get a little bit clearer of what is beneficial for us.
For sure. No question. And again, we're just sharing the learning that we're having through a conversation. Thank you, and until next time, take good care.
Thank you, my friend. See ya.
See ya. Hope you enjoyed today's show. Great to have you part of our over 10,000 strong WealthSpan community. Remember to subscribe if you'd like to learn about our upcoming shows. And as always, make sure you provide some feedback, whether that's a thumbs up or a comment, a question. They're all welcome. If you'd like to subscribe to our quarterly newsletter, you can do that at wealthspan.com. We're always looking for show ideas, or maybe you think you'd like to be a guest. Again, please reach out. to book a motivational talk or inquire about our leadership workshops, email me at info@wellspan.com. Until next time, stay engaged, stay curious, and take good care of you and those in your care.